Across the UK, on DAB digital radio, on the free Times Radio app, and via your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
For the next little while, we want to talk about male body image. Over the last couple of weeks, you may have seen photos of the actor Zac Efron posted on social media, with some people describing him as developed a dad bod. Right? Now, if you haven't heard that phrase, it's often used to describe the male physique, right, of somebody who is perhaps slim, but not necessarily toned or muscular or ripped, if you're familiar with that language, all right? That's what it describes. But it sparked a lot of discussion, really, about whether men are now subject to impossible beauty standards. And in a similar way, actually, that women have been sort of targeted with unrealistic expectations, and in some ways, actually, some quite unhealthy expectations as well. So we wanted to look into this evening for the next little while and just sort of explore what our perceptions are of male body image, what it all means, what's healthy, what we can do to perhaps challenge our perceptions and change our view of ourselves, or indeed of people around us and people that we know. So let's do that with Dave Chawner, stand-up comedian, mental health campaigner and author of Weight Expectations, which details his own experience of living with an eating disorder. Hello, Dave.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and thanks for being with us. If you don't mind sort of taking us back to your own experience of living with an eating disorder.
It sort of developed when I was a sort of late teenager, and it sort of developed rather than began. And I say that, and that sounds really pedantic, but what I mean is I didn't realise that I was slipping into anorexia for a long time. And then when I did realise myself, I didn't really feel anorexic enough to go and get help. My chest didn't look like a toast rack, and I didn't weigh less than a packet of crisps. So I didn't want to go to the GP and ask for help. And it was only about 10 years after that when I was diagnosed as severely clinically anorexic and had to have fast-track treatment in order to help alleviate that. And I was very lucky to have 2.5 years of wonderful therapy in the NHS at the Moseley Hospital in London, and made a full recovery. And the idea there being is I feel very indebted to the NHS for that, so I kind of want to pay that forward and to try and help other people with exactly discussions like this.
Yeah, good. Well, and thank you for joining us. And by the way, just I think an interesting note, it's not pedantic to sort of adjust the language around this, is it? Because actually that's part of the problem is with this discussion is that we don't have the language, the correct language for it, because we don't talk about it enough.
Couldn't agree more, but I also think as well it's a double-edged sword there, because I think there's a lot of keyboard warriors a lot of the time that tell people off for saying specific words, and actually I think intent is a lot more important than content, and actually why you're saying things is a lot more important than the words you actually say. And I think one of the reasons that people don't want to talk about mental health so much is they don't want to get it wrong. They don't want to be targeted by these vicious online campaigns are going, oh my goodness, I can't believe you said that. So yes, I get the nuance with it, but I don't like that backlashy anger that can come online.
Got you. Is it possible in hindsight for you, Dave, then to sort of identify those pressures, those things that led to your diagnosis of anorexia? What was it, do you think, that led to that developing?
I think actually developing is a very good point to start, because actually when I was a teenager, like anyone going through puberty, I'd started to develop my sex drive, and that really scared me because I saw what that did to all the other blokes around me, and they became obsessed by sex. I was never really a masculine man, and I never really wanted to be a masculine man. So when you start to starve your body, you also starve your brain as well, and you get rid of a lot of those emotions. For example, anxiety, not feeling good enough, low self-esteem. And it was a disease coping mechanism in the same way that people might turn to drink or drugs. It wasn't really about the food at all. It was actually about numbing myself and quite literally starving emotions that I didn't know how to deal with or place. Actually, the more that I starved myself, then everything started to feel a little bit more numb, and that became a little bit more bearable. And that's not to glorify or, of course, endorse eating disorders. That's just to try and explain some of the mindset behind it, because for that very short-term gain, there was a long-term detriment.
And I think, Dave, just based on what we've been chatting to you about so far, I think it's helpful to think about what changed for you, what changed your perceptions, and what helped your recovery in terms of sort of fighting against anorexia and emerging from that. Would you say, actually, just as a matter of interest, is it still something that you struggle with, or would you say you have overcome it? Where are you at in that recovery?
Well, it's a good question, Callum, because I think obviously with lockdown, like being restricted exercise and sitting around the flat all day with having food surrounded you, I am not alone in the fact that I think that has probably been a challenging environment to be. And I think a lot of people will feel that, which is why the good work of Beat and Male Voice DD is really important, because I think one of the things that did change is actually hearing other stories, chatting to other people about it. But look, I'm going to bang the drum for this because I'm obviously biased. For me, actually writing comedy about it, performing comedy about it, was a beautiful and unique experience in order to try and break these really difficult things down, because I was never taught at school how to deal with emotions. I had physical education, I haven't had mental education. If I went to the doctor and I said I've got a pain in my stomach, I'd know to use the words throbbing or sharp or localized, whatever. But if I have a pain in my brain, I haven't got any way to start to explain that. So I think that the resources out there and conversations exactly like this one, of hearing things on the radio, on the TV, reading them in the Times and going, oh, you know what, that sounds quite similar to me. That's always generally your first step in order to try and use those building blocks of words and put together your own kind of creation of what this is for you. Because the truth of the matter is, actually trying to explain emotions is very difficult, especially for blokes, because they're generally seen as the fixers. You know, it's normally like if a kid falls over and cries, it's like, oh, you know, they'll run to mommy. Whereas if they need discipline, and it's, oh, you wait till your dad gets home. It's that kind of thing. So being a bloke, I think, does have stumbling blocks in terms of you're not really given those emotional tools. And also, final thing that I do want to say is it's not only anorexia. There's also binge eating disorder and also bulimia, which are they're even more common than anorexia. So there's a whole range of eating disorders here.
Of course. In terms of those conversations to have with friends, with colleagues, with family members, just trying to, I guess, look out for one another in the way that we're talking to one another. What are the sort of helpful solutions and strategies that you can recommend we try to use here?
Well, first and foremost, let's not mince words. That 1 in 4 people has mental illness, but 4 in 4 people has mental health. So actually talking about good mental health when you're healthy and coping is really important. Whenever you talk about mental health generally, people are always like, oh, now for a sob story. But it doesn't have to be like that. It can be fun, and actually good mental health is absolutely brilliant. And specifically in the arena of dad body, actually spinning it around, because I kind of think it's a missed opportunity that Zac Efron could have turned around and said, you know, I've got a dad body. Absolutely. I love having a dad body. 2 fingers up to anyone that thinks that's a bad thing, because you know what? This species would not continue without dads. And actually, I think we're getting so much better. And although we're not perfect, I think it's brilliant that people are realising, oh yeah, that has been photoshopped, and that we are moving forward and that we are improving and actually embracing all different types of body. And also something I do finally want to say as well is that the body positivity movement, all of this idea of that you have to love yourself, that is just yet another unrealistic body standard. You don't have to love every single part of your body. I think it's okay to say, yeah, you know what, I prefer other bits of my body, and, you know, I'm not as that happy, but that is the human experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? That actually we can't set unrealistic expectations for ourselves because we'll never match them, we'll never meet them. Dave Chawner, a stand-up comedian, mental health campaigner, author as well. His book is Weight Expectations, which details his own experience of living with an eating disorder. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time this evening.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.